Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Dr. Carlos Perez, and we've got a special program today on the history and some of our alums and emeritus faculty. And we'd like to welcome everyone. Sit back, relax, and Greg Gale.
Thank you so much, Dr. Perez. Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory Gale. I am the Director of Recruitment and Admissions for the College of Psychology at Nova Southeastern University. And welcome to our webinar. Today, we get to talk about the history of the College of Psychology. So with us today, we have really three individuals who have lots of history to share with us. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. William Dorfman, who is a professor emeritus of the College of Psychology. Second, I'd like to introduce Dr. Donna Hillier, who is a director of academics at the College of Psychology. And third, my colleague, Dr. Carlos Perez. But first, we have a PowerPoint that we're going to share with you. And then afterwards, we're going to have a wonderful conversation about the history of the College of Psychology. So with that, let me share my screen. So what I wanted to do is to start at the beginning. So our university was founded in 1964 in Fort Lauderdale. And we had actually around 7 students who were initially students at our institution. And so I'm just going to go through these PowerPoints, and as I said, afterwards, we're going to stop and have the conversation. What you're seeing are some of the original buildings at the university. Parker Building, which is named after Dr. Louis Parker, is another building on campus, which is where we house our undergraduate College of Psychology programs. We're going to talk about this. This is the Maxwell Maltz building, which is currently where we're located. It is a building that was completed in 1996, 68,000 square feet. We have administrative offices, classrooms, and it was named after Dr. Maxwell Maltz, and we're going to talk about him in a few seconds. The building on your screen is the Center for Collaborative Research. It was opened in 2016. And this is where some of our undergraduate psychology students conduct their research. And then last but not least, the college was fortunate enough to open a brand new location in the Tampa Bay area. And it's a state-of-the-art facility. And part of our College of Psychology, our Department of Counseling, actually offers courses in that area. So with that said, let's go to this conversation. So we'll start off with Dr. Dorfman.
Well, welcome to everyone. You know, after being around Nova for close to 40 years, they like to dust me off every once in a while and bring me on board to talk about history. You know, even though I'm history, I remember coming to the university. Doesn't seem like a long time ago, but I'll share with you from the very beginning what my experience was. Back in 1983, I was recruited to come down to Nova University. It wasn't Nova Southeastern at that point. And specifically to become director of Nova's basically psychology program or community mental health center, which we were calling it at that point, or Nova Clinic. It had several different names at that point, as well as getting a joint appointment with the school Department of Psychology, which at that point had probably 60 students in both a separate PhD program and a separate PsyD program. So those two programs had 2 different faculties and 2 different curricula, and were totally separate at that point. So my wife and I drove down for an interview and a colloquium, and I drove onto the campus. And I probably took a half an hour driving around looking for Nova University. All I found was the first building you saw, the Parker building. There was the Hollywood Mailman building and a couple of trailers. And otherwise it was crabgrass and gravel. In fact, where the psychology building is right now, that came about in, as what I guess Greg said, I've lost track, 1996 or so, was really an airplane landing strip where in World War II, the Bushes, or the elder Bush, trained to fly airplanes. And that basic landing strip had been turned into a parking lot for the sheriff's department to practice driving fast. And they would have cones out there, and the sheriffs would learn how to drive through these cones. So, well, finally, I found someone to let me into the building. This is when I first approached the campus, who was a student in the PhD program at some point. But the campus was basically abandoned. There was nobody there because it was on the weekend. Well, I finally found the facility and had my interview and my colloquium and all of that. And for whatever reason, they accepted me. And I came down on July 1st, 1983, to begin my 40-year experience with Nova, to this day, Nova Southeastern University. And when I arrived in the department, I found two of faculty members who have become my good friends over the years, who remain on the full-time staff. One of them is Alan Cattell. He had been at the university since 1980, when I came in 83. So he was a good friend, as well as Barry Schneider, who continues to entertain and curse and do all those things that he's well known for, as well as being a great teacher. Steve Gold had come a year before I did. Now, I guess he's retired at this point, just recently. And basically, those were the only people, as I can recall, and Frank DiPiano, those were the only, obviously, 4 people that I recall who still remain at Nova. The entire faculty, which had swollen probably in those days from perhaps 13 or 14 faculty between the 2 PhD and PsyD programs, and has swelled to, I guess, close to 40 full-time faculty. The Masters in Counseling did not exist for the most part on campus, but was one of the forerunners really of distance education. Nova University had early on, they were pioneers in the distance education business and were often crucified by more traditional brick and mortar universities for doing distance education and helping people who didn't find full-time college accessible, and Nova was providing it. So they were very prescient in terms of a format that now probably every university in the country uses. So anyway, please interrupt me, anybody, while I go on, because, remember, I was a professor for a lot of years. So I can take up, for those of you who are in the program now, I can take up 3 hours with a 10-minute break very easily and don't, shut up. So, but
well, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling us about your first classes that you taught?
Sure. When I got here on July 1st, since the curriculum and the course assignments had already been established and all the assignments were given out, my first class, interestingly enough, was teaching the MMPI. I had put that together fairly quickly because I really hadn't any preparation. So it was at that point an elective that was injected later on into the curriculum, and everyone now takes a course in the MMPI and other tests. And this is a relatively small group of students, but I remember one of the 3 or 4 students that took that elective was a gal by the name of Anita Fishler, who was the daughter of the president of the university at that point. And she remains a psychologist today and practices in Coral Springs. So yeah, that was my first class. Later on in the fall, this was now the summer semester, in the fall I took on adult psychopathology, which became one of my favorite courses. And then later on taught case conceptualization and interviewing and what else did I teach? You know, the objective personality assessment, the case and all of that business. So besides all the other things. The other significant historical facts that in 1983 or 84, and I lose track of time to be precise, the PhD program received APA accreditation. And I believe it was the next year, 84, 85, that the PsyD program. Now I'm talking at this point separately, because at that point they remain 2 separate programs with 2 separate faculties, and never the twain shall meet. But nevertheless, we early on maintained and have maintained throughout the entire time up until the present APA accreditation. Later on, under the leadership of Frank DiPiano, who was the dean at that point, those 2 programs merged into one program with a shared faculty, but with a PhD track and a PsyD track. And that remains to be the situation with some iterations over the years, but that's basically what students are facing now. So up until 1989, from that point, when I had that joint appointment until about 1989, I was the executive director of Nova University's Community Mental Health Center, which was a fairly large operation that was funded by state and local dollars. It was a public program and was responsible for the mental health services for Western Broward County. So that was a major program. And during that time, I led the development of the internship that we currently have. And during that time, we received, for the first time, a accreditation for our internship program, which today exists in the Psychology Services Center. So we have other programs and other internships that have been approved, but that was the first. So we accomplished a lot in the 80s. And then obviously during the 90s, the program continued to expand from, I think what I mentioned, maybe 30 or 40 PsyD students and a relatively small number of PhD students to what we have now. And I presume that we probably came close to accepting 100 students, first-year students in the PsyD and PhD programs, probably 10 in PhD and the rest in the PsyD program. So what students see now, and faculty or alumni who come back and see it, is an incredibly beautiful campus. And for someone like myself who's watched the development over the last 35 or 40 years, the change in the campus, the change in the reputation, the quality of education has been extraordinary. So I don't know if a new student could appreciate what Nova Southeastern University has accomplished in all of those years. So I do have pride in being a part of that development. The other thing I'll note, and then I'm going to shut up, is that now what I was going to note is now escaped my head. So I'm
we can
sure,
go back.
I'm sure it was critically important, but as I talk, sometimes my talking races faster than my thoughts. But
well, this would be a good opportunity to transition to Dr. Hilliard then,
right.
because she can talk about her history and her connection to you.
You know, as Dr. Dorfman talks about the history of the College of Psychology, a flood of memories just came back when I was originally asked to do this and to greet all of you today. I was asked to bring in a memento, like something that would show what it was like when I was in school back in 1998 when I started the doctoral program here. And I couldn't find anything. And I said to myself, well, in 1998, I believe Google was just developed. So if you think about it, Google was just developed. I don't believe I had a cell phone at that time. So I'm pretty sure I had a cell phone when I was closer to graduation, and the doctoral program takes about 5 years. So if you can just imagine what it was like back then with no Google, or at least the starting of Google and not knowing what it was. And I was slow to kind of adopt these new technology. They were a little bit on the a lot more on the foreign side, and I wasn't sure how to utilize it. So I was constantly walking across campus to that building that Greg had put up on our PowerPoint called the Parker Building, and that was our library before we had this beautiful state-of-the-art library that we have right now. And I remember spending lots of time in that library, and if I'm sure Dr. Dorfman remembers this, it was teeny. And it was packed, and they had these revolving bookshelves that you had to crank. And so I would go in, and I would grab one of those little footstools, and I would just stick myself in a corner where I saw all the journals that I wanted to review, and I would sit there for hours and just look. But one of the things you had to be really careful about is if someone didn't know you were inside those bookcases, they'd start cranking and cranking, and I'd have to yell, "Hey, wait, I'm in here." So he remembers.
I got squashed a couple of times. That library was on the second floor of second floor of the Mailman Hollywood building. Second floor, one floor of the library. Now maybe Parker had one too. That's but right. The changes have been just phenomenal.
The story I was told is that the Mailman Hollywood building, which is the first building on campus, accommodated everything. It accommodated classrooms, it accommodated the library, it accommodated faculty offices, etc., all within one building.
It's true.
Yeah. Okay.
It's true.
That's what I remember.
And the library and the auditorium where the community would meet. We had a small auditorium in the Mailman Hollywood building. There was no sports either, by the way. I think that Frank DiPiano used to run a track program that he sort of mentored himself. But I think we did have a basketball team, and one of the major people in our human resources department used to be a cheerleader for it and would dress up in the cheerleader costume. Nancy Varner, for those, I don't know if anybody remembers Nancy Varner, but
I remember the name.
Yeah, she was in the human resources department, which existed first in a trailer and then later in one of the rooms in the residence halls, one of the residence halls that we had. So we have come from modest places. So
absolutely.
I actually wanted to have Dr. Perez talk about his history.
Well, NSU was pretty much, it felt about the same when I arrived 18 years ago. I remember, though, coming in through the entrance through College Avenue, and there was those beautiful Royal Poincianas that you saw, and I had an interview in Mailman Hollywood. actually for the first time was with a different department, and it seemed pretty modest and small back then. And I think that they were just building the library, and we saw things like the University Center. But one of the key things for me that I've seen in the last couple of years is, and it's funny that Dr. Dorfman mentions athletics, because as we saw athletics grow on the campus, the campus life really exploded with the University Center, and you started to see a lot more undergraduates, students from the medical school coming into this part of the campus, and the campus really collected at the University Center, which is really what a campus University Center should be doing. So the campus life is really just begun to explode, and it really is a beautiful campus with some nice landscape, and it's not too crowded, but it's got a nice vibe.
Mm-hmm. So
let me jump on that with a history of the landscaping. The landscaping, as I told you, was crabgrass and kind of.
It probably used to be a swamp.
What's that?
It was probably originally a swamp.
Well, that was even before. I wasn't the swamp king at that point. So, but anyway, the campus really was not, there was no landscaping. I don't even know if anybody mowed the crabgrass. But we had a president early on, after, I believe, Avid Fishler, who was the really founder of the university. I mean, he was the major figure as it developed. A Dr. Feldman, who had been at the University of, I think, West Connecticut, and was recruited to become the president of the university. And his mission, or at least one of his priorities, was to beautify the campus. And that he did in 1 year, and planted, not personally, but he hired people to plant all of these beautiful palm trees that you see now. That probably was done. Yeah.
I was going to try to find his picture, if that's okay.
Okay.
That was pretty controversial, wasn't it?
What's that?
That was pretty controversial.
Yes, there he is. Yes, there he is on the left. And the other is Avid Lewis, who was a wonderful, wonderful guy, who was the dean of the law school, and then became, I think, a provost, and then became president of the university for a period of time. So sadly, Feldman did a major attempts at beautifying the campus, which he did, planted all of those beautiful palms. And then something happened that happens in South Florida all the time. We had a hurricane, and the hurricane knocked the entire, forest of palm trees down. And we were back to gravel and crabgrass for a while. But obviously, you see that it's really changed, and it's a beautiful campus. There's a story to everything.
Yes. So I'm very much interested in what student life was like here. So Donna, you're a student here. What was it like for you as a student?
Well, it was quite busy in the doctoral program, and I developed a friendship with this girl that we're actually still very close friends with. She lived in the British Virgin Islands, and she's now a psychologist and running a lot of big things in administration in the British Virgin Islands. But we remained pretty close together and helped each other through the program. We were a cohort of doctoral students, so we had our own cohorts, and we went through the program together, and everybody was pretty tight. We stuck around the Malts building, which is a beautiful building. As you mentioned, it was built in 1996, and we started in 1998, so we were pretty impressed by the all of the resources that were available in the building. So faculty were there all the time. Unlike the pandemic right now where everybody's working remotely, it's kind of a little different and sad, but we could just drop by, you know, the good Dr. Dorfman's office and say, hey, how are you doing? Or I have a question about, you know, this case conceptualization. Dr. Dorfman just reminded me that I was in his case conceptualization class back in the days. I'd be able to just, you know, sit down and have conversations and be close with our faculty. So it was, what I would say is I just remember this cohesive team that we worked with very supportive faculty. It was, it seemed slow at the time, but it went very, very quickly. And after I graduated, it only took probably, I think, a year or two before I decided to return back to the university. And I came in and served in a couple of leadership roles since then. I started back with the College of Psychology as the director of the counseling program, and stayed in that position probably from 2005 to about 2011, and decided to spread my wings a little bit. And I moved over to the Mailman-Siegel Center, where I served as the director of academics for quite some time. And within recent years, there's been some reorganization with the university. So I am happy to be back at the College of Psychology and serving as a faculty member here, and excited to be working with all the students that are coming in.
So I wanted to share this this screen with you. So Nova University, and again, this was the building where everything was located. So were these some of the palm trees you were talking about, or were there more additional palm trees?
There were many more. This was an early palm tree. It was an orphan that somehow popped up out of the weeds.
And so we've transitioned from that to this, which is, as you're saying, for individuals who had not seen what the university looked like in the 60s, the 70s, and 80s, and then arrived here, this is a night and day kind of sort of change. When you see this, both of you, when you see this, what does it tell you?
Well, it tells me it cost a lot of money, and a lot of community support, and an increasingly popular and credible university that gained community support and public support and student support by virtue of coming here. And you know, that there has been a, you know, Broward County and surrounding areas have been very generous with the support of the university, as well as students who, through their tuition, has supported it. But we could only do it if students were attracted to the university. By the way, I remembered what I was going to say, but I'll save it for another point I want to make. But anyway, it's obviously an impressive thing to look at.
You know, for me, back in the days, our campus was very, very small. So when we hung out anywhere in terms of our favorite place to be, it was always at the Malts Psychology building, or we'd walk over to the law school and grab a little bit of lunch at the kiosk that they had. But to see the progress and the development and how beautiful the campus is now, and to walk through the university and see students, you know, sitting on the benches out near the lake and studying and putting down picnic blankets down and studying and sitting with each other and socializing. It's been such a wonderful, such a wonderful thing to be a part of and to be able to see.
I'm going to stop sharing, but talk about the student body at that time. I mean, where did they come from? Who were they? Dr. Dorfman, do you want to say the students that were in your class, were they from Florida? Were they from elsewhere?
Well, actually, my recollection is that they really were from throughout the United States. Uh-huh. The Masters in Counseling, or the Mental Health Counseling program, tended to draw most of the students, because of the part-time online or distance education. We would have different sites in Tampa and Jacksonville and so on. They tended to come from those areas in Florida. Now, I'm really not sure what the demographics are today, but many of those students, I think, came from the area, this area, but not so with the doctoral program. I mean, as a APA-approved program, with the reputation that we had developed, we were getting students from all across the United States and South America, and they were excellent students coming from excellent universities. The point I was going to make before, that it just dodged into my head again, I want to make it before I forget it again, is that when I came to the university in '83, the only full-time faculty on campus was the psychology faculty. All other faculty were part-time, adjuncts. There may have been a couple of people in the business school, and the other full-time faculty, let me take it back, is the oceanography faculty. But the oceanography faculty was probably just less than 10 people. I think it's a relatively small faculty, I believe. But our 30 or so students and our probably 20 faculty at that point were the only full-time, everyday, face-to-face brick-and-mortar faculty at the university. And obviously, you all know how dramatically that's changed. Not only have buildings expanded, but the faculties, as we've added from Nova University to Nova Southeastern University, not only one, but two medical schools and all the other allied medical services. This is, basically unprecedented. There are very few universities in the United States that have a allopathic as well as a DO osteopathy program. So, Nova's breaking through on so many areas. So we're all very proud of it.
Go ahead. You said you had a friend who is now in the British Virgin Islands. So where were your colleagues from at that time?
It was quite diverse. I mean, in terms of the student body, we were quite diverse. I'd have to say, and I wanted to mention too, that as I was teaching throughout the programs, one of the programs that I taught for was the online Master's in Science and Counseling program. And that was probably some of the more diverse classes that I've held. I've had political figures, I've had mayors, to students who just graduated from their bachelor's program, sitting all in one class and sharing ideas and really coming to commonalities. That part blew my mind, to be able to have such diverse number of students coming into one place. It's a pretty cool process.
I want to share one other picture with you. This is obviously the building that we work in, the Maxwell Maltz building. Now, Dr. Dorfman, maybe you can tell us about why the word psychology was put on the building and sort of when that occurred. And then if you want to talk about Dr. Maltz and his wife, Ann Maltz, if you have any stories to share with us.
Well, some. I mean, I don't know if I want to tread into why psychology was put on the building, because it was ultimately taken off, which is another part of our history. But Maxwell Maltz had written a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, and somehow, and I really don't have information or can't remember it, about how he became involved or interested in the university. But the Maltz building was significantly funded by a grant or a gift, really, from Maxwell Maltz. And I believe at the time that we received the gift, Maxwell Maltz had passed away, but his wife was the primary donor at that point. I think I'm correct on that, but I wouldn't swear to it. So as a result, the commitment as I recall it, was that the building was a psychology building, and consequently, psychology was in the masthead. Subsequently, there was a allocation of programs that took place for the reasonable plan of making sure that all space was provided and its programs had the necessary space. So we inherited another program in our building that was not a psychology program, and as a result of that, that psychology was taken off the building. Now, I haven't been to campus since the COVID. I'm assuming that that's not been back on, is it?
No, it's not on, no.
Yeah. So that's a whole other little political thing that happened. And the faculty wasn't all that enamored of that decision, but I think everybody understood the reason for it. But the building was originally dedicated exclusively to the psychology program.
Yeah, the story I was told is that Dr. Maltz actually taught on campus in the 70s, I believe. And when he passed away, his wife wanted to have something to sort of signify his connection to the university. And she and another person, I believe her name was Ann Hutt, donated the funds for the construction of the building.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I wasn't aware that he had taught on campus.
And this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this, because much of our history is really oral. And so this is our way of actually trying to, keep that history for posterity's sake.
Actually, well, I'll tell you another little bit of trivia. Dr. Lippman, who I think is he still the chancellor of the medical school?
I believe so.
He wrote his doctoral dissertation, because he has a EDD, I think, from Nova, on the history. And there's a book
Yes.
he published on the history of Nova University.
That's the book I'm referencing.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
So, Dr. Hillier, tell me the first time when you actually walked into the Maxwell Maltz building. What was that like?
I was quite overwhelmed. It was, I was very nervous. I didn't know what, getting a doctoral degree meant. We sat in relatively small size classes, and our classes were 3 hours each, and it was a full day. I mean, you would go in and you were committed to going to class morning and afternoon, and then you'd spend the rest of your time doing clinical training through practicum. And I remember, just being full-time as a student, being on the campus and then going straight into the hospital and training all the way sometimes until 9, 10, and being back in rounds at 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's pretty intense. It was pretty intense. And I think having the support of your cohorts and your particular friends that you stuck through and you tried to have classes, the similar classes with, was very helpful for sure.
And how did teaching change from Dr. Dorfman from the time you arrived here to then going into this brand new building? How did your teaching change over time?
Well, certainly the resources that we've used to teach have changed over time. I mean, you're all the current students and staff and faculty are certainly aware of all the technological changes that have happened and the resources that are provided in classrooms. My recollection is that we used to, in teaching, we used overhead projectors. I don't know if there's a student on campus that knows what an overhead projector is.
If I could I share this with you?
Sure. Yeah, there's Schneider and it's Rorschach, absolutely. And I think Schneider probably still uses the overhead projector.
This summer, I removed all the overheads.
Yes,
the floors.
Okay. Okay, well, that certainly put a hole in Schneider's teaching. So he's probably had to adapt to you know, the PowerPoints and all that. But, you know, in terms of the technology, I'm remembering back in '83, they did put in all of our offices a computer, the 1983 brand of a computer. Well, I hadn't really used a computer in 1983. I had a Texas Instruments calculator that added, subtracted, multiplied, and divided that I paid probably $120 for. And I had to have a student teach me how to turn the damn thing on. I had it on the desk, but all it did is collect dust. I didn't know what to do with it. So it really was the beginning of my use of computers and technology that I used to teach. So that, but in terms of teaching style and experience in a classroom, probably it hasn't changed all that much. I mean, I come from a time when lecture was the primary vehicle for communicating information and interchange with students, and I had to be, you know, drawn into the 21st century when students were depending on Canvas and Blackboard and communicating, you know, in social media and so on and so forth. So it really has been more a function of the technology than my style of teaching. So, and that's primarily I'm still doing the same routine.
If it's okay, I'll mention something that I've noticed in terms of teaching and change. I was definitely one of those students that had those projectors with our instructors, but as I've become faculty and I've been teaching over the years, I've noticed that students, instead of taking notes, they've found more effective ways to take pictures of any PowerPoint slides that I have and combine them, and they're using laptops and iPads and Zoom. Now our classes actually have what's called BlendFlex, where, you know, there's video cameras in all of our classrooms, and so students can elect to either come to campus or stay at home and be able to utilize all these wonderful technology in the classroom. So the camera actually follows the instructor, in addition to using Zoom to teach the class. So I think our students have definitely gotten more sophisticated over time, where they're finding more efficient ways to be able to take notes and to memorize things. And I think that's the biggest difference that I've seen, where I was used to writing very furiously and making sure that I was getting my copious notes and getting every important information. Now students go into my class and they take pictures of my PowerPoint slides, which I thought was pretty unique and smart.
Ingenious.
Yes.
I'll stop sharing. I don't know if sort of where you've seen the university grow, if you have thoughts concerning what we're going to look like in the near future, maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road.
Well, I'm not very good at prognostication, but I have to admit and be very honest, especially in light of what I think Donna was saying, which is absolutely true. I have really struggled with the movement to social media, PowerPoints. I'm not totally convinced that the experience students have in terms of the interaction with faculty, the approach in face-to-face education. I struggle with that, and I recognize I'm a dinosaur in that respect. But I think the opportunity to sit with the students face-to-face, to engage in face-to-face communication and taking those notes, I would say, help to solidify them in your head, as opposed to the passive approach of taking a picture of them. PowerPoints alone are really one of the biggest mistakes, I think, we all, and I've used PowerPoints, but only because otherwise it looks like I really am a dinosaur. So over the years I've used PowerPoints, and they certainly serve a purpose, but I think PowerPoints distract students from listening and interacting with a professor. And I think it's a very passive approach to communicating information. But that's just an editorial. I don't think that that's going to change. And with respect to your question, Greg, I see more of that, more electronic communication, more, I mean, students are now downloading textbooks. They don't have textbooks. So not that necessarily is such a bad thing, but I think, again, I know I experienced problems because I've been back to teach at the university after I left full-time faculty, and taught a course actually in objective personality assessment, where I give exams that involve looking at texts, looking at the material, and then interpreting the protocols that I give people, so they have application of how to do this. And I found that when they download those texts on the computer, it makes it more difficult to answer the questions that I ask them, because they can't get to them, flip through the book in the same way. Now, they may feel differently because they're much more adept, I should say, at using all that technology. But it just, I think it's depersonalized the educational process. But that's not at Nova uniquely. But I see more of that down the road. I see that happening, and I'm not sure how long brick and mortar universities are going to be around. I think we may go back to the old Nova model of distance education, which is where we are right now.
Hopefully we'll be able to find a nice balance at some point in time. I know in terms of psychology, we were, really looking at the challenges of technology and how would it impact our particular field, because certainly it is very impactful, and with this pandemic, it has thrusted us, whether we liked it or not, into the world of technology. And so not only are students forced to focus on learning using technology, but they're also forced to think about how this is going to impact how they're going to practice when they're out as well, and to be able to practice in a way that's legal and ethical. I don't think that we're going to go, as Dr. Dorfman said, I don't think we're going to go backwards, but I think that eventually we'll find a nice balance between the both. I definitely think that, especially with our fields, the connection is so important. And what I've learned even through this pandemic of being able to see everybody via Zoom, at least there's some level of connection. It's certainly not the same as seeing somebody face to face, but I can see the shifts that we can make, and I can see how we can integrate these different types of wonderful technology into our world and make this work for us. But certainly we are going to be the leaders. Our students who are here with us today are going to be the leaders in helping us to shape our field, and I'm excited to see what our next steps are going to be.
So I do have one final question, and then I'll just let you everyone else talk. You have so much history at this university. If you could tell a newly admitted student to our programs, if you could offer them advice, sort of what types of advice would you give them?
I would suggest that they savor every single day of their educational experience, because what many of them don't appreciate is how quickly it goes, and you never get the richness and the experience and the camaraderie and the exploration of new information, and to grow as a therapist, to grow as a clinician over time. It is a wonderful experience to go from a college psychology major, let's say, to a full-fledged professional with the kind of responsibilities they have. I think it's too easy to wish it were over as quickly as possible and get on with their professional practice. But it is a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I look back on my own graduate education and I'd like to be back there. So savor every minute, and as tough as it may get sometimes and as stressful, you will look back on it, I think, as a wonderful experience. So don't waste a day.
Mm-hmm. Good advice.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the students that come into our program are passionate about what they want to do, you know, and what I would say is to tap back into that passion and to remind themselves of why they started the program to begin with. You know, I was in a CCE case, which is a clinical competency exam for our doctoral students this week. And the exam itself took about 2 hours. There was an oral defense where the student, you know, had to defend her particular case. And after the CCE was over, one of the things that she said was, I really enjoyed this process, which is not something you typically hear students say because they're very nervous. This is a monumental moment for these students where they have to take, you know, they're really showcasing their knowledge and their skills so that they can move on to internship. And in fact, those students who are not able to pass that exam typically have to hold back for a year and do, you know, additional studies and then prepare that again. So it's a big deal. And when I heard her say to me, you know, I really enjoyed this. And I asked her why. She said, it's because I thought about the process. She's like, I you know, during the, it's just like in the beginning of the exam, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I just want to get this over with. But as it was going in, the questions that we were asking her, it provoked her to think. It provoked her to be in the moment and to think about, you know, the case very thoroughly. And she enjoyed that process. So if I could give any advice, I would say, remember why you started the program to begin with, and be in the moment and really enjoy the process, the learning process, because that's really actually quite fun. But if you're rushing to, as Dr. Dorfman had mentioned, rushing to just get the next step, you know, get this step done and move on to the next step, you kind of lose a lot of that meaningful experience that's presented to you during that time. So yeah, draw on the passion and be in the moment.
Any highlights that we didn't talk about that you think everyone should know about?
Come to NOVA if you want an excellent education in clinical psychology and mental health counseling. By the way, do any of the participants get to ask questions, or do they sit passively aside? And
They're welcome to ask a question. They could actually unmute if they wanted to, or submit a question by chat. See, the engaging professor wants to bring the audience in, the class in. And actually, Dr. Dorfman, in case we get a few seconds for a question, I just wanted to mention to you, I think one of the nice things that with the explosion of Zoom and that people have embraced this, some of the distance programs are reintroducing robust lectures, as you mentioned. And it's kind of like Dr. Hillier said, that if the lecturers might embrace technology and the distance program would embrace the lecture more, we're probably going to see a better product for both in the future. And no questions have popped in. I'm going to ask you one last question. Tell us a little bit about your most memorable student.
Dr. Dorfman.
I think Donna is probably way up.
Of course.
That's hard to, it really is hard to say. I've had wonderful students over the years, and some, by the way, the ones that I can remember are typically the ones that have been more available to me and more open and less passive about the whole learning experience. I think too often students, this is sort of by recommendation, that students need to engage with professors and not hopefully feel intimidated or reticent to do that. And I think sometimes students do feel uncomfortable taking risks in class. One of my biggest concerns throughout my teaching experience is how too many students maintain a lot of passivity in class. So if I ask a question or ask them to opine on something, I get everybody looks like they're posing for animal crackers, and it's not because they don't have the answers. It's just a reticence, even at the graduate level, to take a risk of being involved. So many people pass by that I don't remember, but I've had some wonderful wonderful students, and it's hard to answer that any one in particular, especially if they're listening to this at any point in time. Donna stands out among the great ones.
That's
what
really
a great answer.
Advice. Great advice.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr.
No, I wanted to say you've stood up to some really tough faculty. I remember you telling me the stories of your challenges as a graduate assistant.
As a graduate assistant, I'm trying to think back. Okay, I remember that now. I think with life, everything is quite challenging, but we endure and we figure things out. There's no doubt. I wanted to address the question though about favorite students, and I would say I'm not thinking so much of favorite student as a memorable student. There was a student in my class that was working full time and was an older student, and he did quite average in the class. He came back to me recently and he called me and he said, listen, I just got a political appointment and I think you graded me wrong in the past. And I thought that was so interesting because he did very, very well. He was very successful in the class. Of course, he was striving for the highest grade he could possibly get. And he is now a politically appointed figure in Florida. So I thought that was pretty impressive to have someone like that in my class and to have him reconnect.
Good. So this has been really enjoyable for me. I'm a history major by training, and so I love listening to history, especially oral history. And so what we're going to do is this is being recorded, and this will be on the College of Psychology website for posterity's sake. And my hope is that we can continue doing these kinds of conversations going forward, because I think we always need to hear about our past because it guides us in terms of where we go and especially the decisions we will have to make going forward. So with that said, I'll send it back to Dr. Perez.
Well, Donna, Dr. Hillier, I gave you a special gift.
Yes.
You might want to show that off.
I can open it now. I've been wondering what it was. It's sitting next to, oh, a shark. I've been wanting one of these sharks, you know, our mascot. There's something a little bit heavier on the bottom, so let me pull that out.
And this is a special gift that we have been giving our speakers, special guests, and Dr. Dorfman, I'll ship one to you if you're not coming on campus.
Thank you very much. I got a keychain, a lovely keychain.
Okay.
Should I open this or should I savor it and wait for later?
All right. Carlos gave me the first medallion that was given.
Wow.
Remember that, Carlos?
Yes.
That medallion, which
I do. We actually did a photo shoot with you.
That's right.
You were angry because the last photo shoot I didn't use it enough.
Well, typically you didn't use my picture enough throughout my entire career.
But
anyway.
Now, one thing, we still have one VCR on campus, so you could show us that clip of when you were on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
And I have seen that clip. I have seen that clip.
Well, that's on YouTube, so I don't even need the yeah.
Oh, we're gonna have to look that up and put it up.
Absolutely. Everybody's got their 15 minutes. But I wanted to thank both of you for inviting me. to do this. It's been fun.
Mhm.
You don't have an opportunity to pontificate very often once you go into the emeritus status. So I appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun and I've enjoyed it.
Our pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you
our
so much
pleasure
for
having
having
you.
us.
And my hope is that we can do similar events in the future.
Yes,
Well,
thank you so much for having us. I'm so excited to be here and to meet all of our students.
So yes, thank you so much on behalf of the College of Psychology. Thank you so much for participating. This has been wonderful. And as I said, it will be on our website, hopefully in the next few days. Thank you.